Good evening and welcome to Last Orders from the European Parliament in Strasbourg. Well, red lines or red herrings. Gordon Brown returned from Lisbon claiming opt-outs from the new European Treaty will protect our national interest. But although the government promised a referendum on the so-called Constitution, Mr Brown says the debate on the treaty will be restricted to Parliament. So if the Prime Minister won't trust the people, can they trust him? Well, at least Charlotte's giving the regulars a chance to have their say.
Hello, Michael. Well, the battle lines are drawn. We might have to wait until the new year for the 20 days of parliamentary debate, but the arguments are already intense. The government's saying that the Lisbon Treaty is designed to make the European Union more efficient. But the Conservatives are saying it's just the Constitution in disguise. Well, let's find out now what our Last Orders regulars think. Can I start by asking you all, it's very complicated, this Lisbon Treaty. How many of you actually understand what it's all about? One-ish here, not many. Margaret, do you think that that is part of the problem at the moment, that we're not really getting to grips with what it actually means?
Well, that's the problem. You pick up the newspapers and they've all got their own little baby, and everyone's thinking, oh goodness, if that's true, I don't want it. Or if that's true, oh well, that sounds okay. Why don't they give us a document and put it in plain English and spell it out to us?
Caroline, do you share that view that so far, and it's only been a week, but so far that the government, Gordon Brown in particular, is just not selling it?
No, they're not selling it at all, because there's so much publicity surrounding it, because every time there's a new proposal, the newspapers will come out, they have their own opinion, the different political parties will come out and they'll try sort of to put their own view forward, and at the end of the day the public is confused and very scared. So when people are scared, they don't want to get involved, they don't want to sign up to anything they don't understand, because they just feel overwhelmed.
Okay, well, in a nutshell, and in a very simple nutshell, the idea of this Lisbon Treaty is to make the European Union more efficient. There's 27 countries and it should make it work more efficiently so that they can get on with the real business of solving Europe's and the world's problems. Now, do you think that in principle that's a good idea?
The question I would ask is how. I mean, we've got that many opt-outs of it, so what are we opting in for? We hear our politicians in power at the moment talking about red lines for this, red lines for that. Well, what are we opting in then? Take the other view. What are we actually going to do within Europe? So
you're worried that we'd just be a part-time member?
Yeah, I mean, a friend of mine said all we're doing is cherry-picking. Is that what we've done? Have we cherry-picked it? Or is there some substance in what we're going to be doing in Europe?
The EU have now banned cherry-picking.
All right, David, is that a view that you share, that if all these opt-outs, whether or not they're in the national interest, means that we're actually very much a part-time member?
I think it's all on paper, these opt-outs. I mean, those red lines, I don't know whether they actually exist. Can we actually are they exercised? When can we exercise them? I think the key problem with the European Union is, because it's changed so much since its conception, they can't even balance the books. They haven't actually provided a European sort of budget settlement. Anything that makes it more simple and slicker as an organisation is a good thing, because at the moment there's so much waste. All our money is going
down.
So
are you in favour of this?
I'm in favour of a treaty which pulls it together, makes it a tighter, more efficient structure, but not necessarily to the detriment of things like foreign policy, etc.
All right. Well, that's one of the things that our interests have been protected, if we're to believe Gordon Brown. That's one of the things that he's talked many, many times about, the national interest being protected. But I know, Sam, that you feel very strongly about a referendum.
Yeah, I mean, Gordon Brown has never won a general election. All three major parties campaigned on the promise of a referendum on this treaty.
On the Constitution?
This is the Constitution by any other name. And they all campaigned on a referendum for it. If Gordon Brown wanted to put this through Parliament, he should have called an election 3-4 weeks ago and said, we will not call this election. Then he would have had a mandate to do it. As he is, he doesn't.
All right. Sean, what's your view? Do you think there should be a referendum?
Yes, I think there needs to be a referendum. I think people need to understand exactly what this is all about, because bearing in mind we struggle to make decisions on very important things in this country. These are very major decisions affecting everyone in this country and across Europe, and I think this is where we need to all understand what's in there and what it means for Great Britain and people that live within it.
you're shaking your head. You're not in favour of a referendum.
I'm not in favour at all, I think with 27 countries in Europe, and if we waited for everybody to have a referendum, it could take years and we're not going to get anything done. If we make the decision now to sign the treaty in December, we've got 1 year for everybody to do the ratifications of the treaty, and at the end of that year, then we can start sorting out our serious problems of global warming, climate
On the other
changes.
hand, Sean makes the point, as does Sam, that these are very, very important matters that perhaps the people of this country should decide for themselves.
I think we should have a lot of media interest, and truthful media interest, and education, but I think the Parliament, at the end of the day, should discuss
All right.
it.
Well, just a quick question, just mischievously, I must ask this. How many of you think that Tony Blair would make a good president? First president of the European Union.
He's been a great Prime Minister, hasn't he?
How many? Nobody? Nobody got their hands up? Well, there we are then. Our advice to Tony Blair is don't give up your day job.
Bye, Tony.
Richard Corbett there. Do you think Tony Blair should be President of Europe?
I think Charlotte would make a very good president, don't you?
Let's just stick to the issue.
What this is about is that the current 6-month presidency of the European Council, that's the meeting of Prime Ministers, will change into a 30-month presidency. A little bit more continuity. It's not a dramatic change. It's
Gordon
useful
Brown
and
will want
pragmatic.
Tony Blair like a hole in the head, won't he?
They'll see who they want to chair their meetings. It's up to the Prime Ministers to decide.
Let's get to the gist of it. Gordon Brown came back to the House of Commons and basically made it into a negative treaty, telling us all what's not in it and how Britain isn't going to be part of it. Isn't that very negative? Why is he so defensive about this wonderful treaty?
He's defensive because people have made so many ludicrous claims about it that he has to first point out, no, it doesn't do this, no, it doesn't create a superstate, no, it doesn't transfer more powers to Brussels, no, it doesn't do all these horrible things that some newspapers claim and some opposition parties claim. But indeed, you're right, I think it's time now to go out on the offensive and say, this is a good treaty for Britain and for Europe, it streamlines the institutions, but above all, it makes them more accountable.
I want to bring in Tim Kirkhope here for the Tories. Now, your leader, back to the old agenda, everything from Europe is bad, you want a referendum, and yet, by the time you ever get near government, should you win the election in 2009, 2010, ratification will have been and gone, and your leader's going to have the Tory party split because he won't be able to unpick it, won't want to unpick it. So what's all this Tory nonsense about a referendum anyway? Hot air.
Well, I think it's just holding people to account. After all, I think you've got to treat leading politicians, prime ministers in particular, as honourable people until they prove otherwise. And, of course, the Labour Party, Gordon Brown as part of the government, gave an undertaking in their manifesto in the general election in 2005 that they would have a referendum on the Constitution. On the Constitution, Richard, which is what this is, and nobody can deny it.
Now, will you give a guarantee in your manifesto at the next general election that should ratification have taken place by 2009, you will still hold a referendum?
Well,
Yes or no?
No, I'm not yes or no. It depends, because it depends on where we are at that point.
So you're attacking the Labour Party for breaking their manifesto commitment, yet you won't give the same manifesto commitment in your election.
Well, we haven't prepared the manifesto yet. That's a matter for David
It
Cameron
was
to
written for
prepare it.
last month's general election that never happened.
Well, I haven't seen the manifesto. I don't know whether you have, but I think that the Labour Party does have a manifesto. It's 2 years ago. It was a promise to the people of Britain, and they are reneging on the promise.
I want to bring in Bill Newton-Dunn here. Now, you've got a leadership crisis going on in the Liberal Democrats at the moment.
It's a nice
But
contest.
it's an opportunity for you Liberal Democrats to say whether you want or why you want a referendum on staying in or getting out of Europe, and not on the actual mechanics of this treaty.
Well, first of all, Michael, our two candidates who are competing for the leadership of the Lib Dems have both said no referendum. So we're
No referendum at all on anything?
No, not on the Constitution or the Lisbon Treaty, the thing that Charlotte was talking about. I just point out to dear Charlotte that Britain has never, ever put a treaty to a public referendum. That's what MPs at Westminster are for, to do the detailed study and the debate. And that's what should be happening this time too.
Wasn't it pretty rash then for the government to give a commitment to have a referendum?
I entirely agree.
Yes, carry on. Well, I'm just saying it is completely wrong to give promises and then not keep them. And there's no doubt about it that however you define this